Hello, and welcome to History for Sleep. Tonight, you're about to travel back nearly 700 years to a world where every sunrise carried both hope and uncertainty. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in somewhere comfortable. Dim the lights if you can. Relax your shoulders, and let the noise of the modern world slowly fade into the distance. If you enjoy peaceful journeys through history and haven't already subscribed, I'd love to invite you to join our growing community. Every week, we explore another forgotten corner of the past through calm storytelling designed to help you relax, unwind, and perhaps even drift gently to sleep. Now, take one slow breath and let us leave the 21st century behind. It is the winter of the year 1348. The world around you feels both familiar and strangely different. Europe is still deeply medieval. Great stone castles rise above frozen valleys. Timber villages huddle together against the bitter cold. Monasteries echo with prayer before dawn. Merchants continue to travel dusty roads despite the snow. Blacksmiths still hammer glowing iron. Bakers still rise long before sunrise. Farmers still tend to the animals that have carried families through another harsh winter. Life continues. It always has. And for most people, it must. You are not a king. You are not a knight. You are not a wealthy merchant traveling between great cities. You are simply one ordinary person living in a small village somewhere in northern Europe. Your home is modest. Your possessions are few. Your days are governed by the changing seasons rather than clocks. The church bell marks the passing hours. The weather determines your work. The fire decides whether the night will be comfortable or painfully cold. Most mornings begin exactly the same. You wake, you rebuild the fire, you check the weather, you tend the animals, you eat simple food, you work until darkness returns. It is a life that has changed very little for generations. Or at least, it was. Because this winter feels different. No one can quite explain why. Weeks ago, travelers arriving from distant towns began carrying unusual stories. Some spoke quietly beside roadside fires. Others whispered inside crowded inns after sunset. A few refused to speak of what they had seen at all. The rumors seemed impossible. Entire villages falling strangely silent. Churchyards filling faster than anyone could dig. Markets closing without warning. Families disappearing almost overnight. Some blamed poisoned air. Others believed strange stars had altered the heavens. Many were certain that God himself was testing humanity. Most people simply hoped the stories would remain exactly that. Stories. After all, terrible rumors have always traveled faster than truth, especially during winter. For now, your own village remains much the same as it always has. Smoke still curls from cottage chimneys each morning. The village baker still prepares fresh loaves before sunrise. Children still chase one another through muddy lanes whenever the weather allows. The village blacksmith still begins work before daylight reaches the rooftops. Life continues, and because life continues, so do you. This morning will begin much like yesterday, or so you believe. Outside, the winter wind moves quietly through bare oak branches. Snow left behind by yesterday's storm clings stubbornly to rooftops and stone walls. The narrow lane outside your cottage lies almost untouched. Only a handful of footprints disturb the white surface. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl calls only once before silence returns. The air is perfectly still, cold enough that every breath hangs like pale smoke. Inside your small timber cottage, the fire has burned low during the long night. Only a few glowing embers remain beneath a blanket of soft grey ash. The warmth they once offered has almost disappeared. The room has grown steadily colder while you slept. Your wool blanket no longer feels quite warm enough. Somewhere nearby, another log settles quietly inside the hearth with a gentle crack. Beyond the shuttered window, dawn has not yet arrived. The village still sleeps beneath a sky filled with fading stars. For one last peaceful moment, the world seems untouched. Still. Silent. Waiting. You cannot yet know that historians will one day remember this year more than almost any other in medieval Europe. You cannot know the names that future generations will give to these months, nor the stories they will write, nor the countless books that will try to explain what happened. For you, this is simply another cold winter morning, another day to live, another fire to light, another loaf of bread to share, another walk through familiar village streets. And that is where our story begins. The cold reaches you before your thoughts do. Not suddenly, not sharply. It arrives the way winter often does, patiently creeping through timber walls and beneath thick wool blankets until your body slowly realizes that the warmth of the night has faded away. For a few quiet moments your eyes remain closed. You are neither fully asleep nor fully awake. The silence inside the cottage feels almost complete. Only the faint crackle of dying embers reminds you that the fire still lives, if only barely. You pull the blanket a little closer around your shoulders. The rough wool scratches softly against your chin, its familiar texture comforting, despite the chill that has settled into every corner of the room. Outside, the world remains hidden beneath darkness. No sunlight has yet touched the horizon. The stars are still visible beyond the wooden shutters, though you cannot see them from where you lie. You simply know they are there. Winter mornings have their own kind of silence. It is different from the silence of summer. Summer carries distant birdsong, insects, moving leaves, and the occasional murmur of people beginning their work. Winter keeps its voice much lower. Snow absorbs sound. Frozen earth refuses to echo footsteps. Even the wind seems to move more carefully across the sleeping countryside. You open your eyes. The cottage around you slowly comes into focus. The room is small, smaller than many people today might imagine. Every part of it has been built with purpose rather than comfort. Heavy oak beams stretch across the ceiling above your head, blackened by decades of smoke escaping the hearth. The walls are formed from sturdy timber frames packed with woven branches and hardened clay, a method that has served families here for generations. Tiny gaps remain, despite careful construction. No medieval home is perfectly sealed against winter. Thin streams of icy air quietly find their way inside. Over the years, you have stopped noticing most of them. Your bed is little more than a sturdy wooden frame supporting a simple mattress stuffed with straw. The straw shifts softly beneath your weight as you move. Fresh straw smells pleasantly sweet. Older straw carries the earthy scent of dried grass mixed with smoke, wool, and countless winters. It is not luxurious, but it is warm enough when covered with thick blankets and shared body heat. Many families sleep together during the coldest months. Parents, children, even elderly grandparents often remain beneath the same layers of wool through long winter nights. Warmth is too valuable to waste. You slowly lift one hand from beneath the blanket. The cold greets your skin immediately. Your fingers feel stiff after the night. Not painfully so. Simply cold enough to remind you that the fire will need attention before anything else today. The hearth sits at the center of the room. It is more than a fireplace. It is the heart of the home. Nearly every part of daily life depends upon it. Food is cooked there. Water is heated there. Clothing dries beside it. Stories are shared around it. Without fire, winter quickly becomes dangerous. Even now, only a handful of glowing coals remain beneath a blanket of pale ash. Tiny ribbons of heat still rise from them, enough to save you from beginning again with cold flint and steel. You are grateful for that. Starting a new fire from nothing is slow work. Keeping yesterday's fire alive is far easier. Almost every household in your village thinks the same way. Fire is carefully watched, carefully fed, rarely allowed to die completely. The blanket slips from your shoulders. Cold air immediately settles across your back. For a moment, you hesitate. Every medieval winter morning begins with the same quiet debate. Remain beneath the blankets just a little longer, or rise and begin the day's work. Eventually, necessity wins. It always does. You swing your feet onto the packed earth floor. The ground feels icy, even through your thick wool stockings. Many medieval cottages have earthen floors rather than wooden ones. They are practical, easy to repair, less expensive to build. Fresh rushes scattered across the floor help absorb moisture, while adding a little warmth beneath your feet. The dried reeds release a faint grassy scent each time someone walks across them. You stand slowly, allowing your stiff legs to adjust. A heavy wool tunic hangs from a wooden peg nearby. You pull it over your linen undergarment. The wool is coarse compared with modern fabrics, yet remarkably effective at trapping warmth. Layer upon layer, that is how people survive winter. Linen against the skin, wool over linen, a thick cloak for the outdoors, a hood pulled tightly around the head. Leather boots lined with scraps of wool whenever possible. There are no insulated jackets, no electric heaters, no central heating waiting with the push of a button. Warmth must be built, protected, earned. You walk quietly toward the hearth, careful not to wake the others still sleeping nearby. Their steady breathing fills the little cottage with quiet reassurance. One child turns beneath the blankets before becoming still once more. Someone murmurs softly in a dream. The ordinary sounds of a family at rest. For now, the worries of the world remain outside these walls. You kneel before the fireplace. Using a simple iron poker, you gently move the blanket of ash aside. Almost immediately, tiny orange lights appear beneath the grey surface. The fire is still alive. You smile to yourself. Only slightly, a small victory. Taking several dry twigs stored beside the hearth, you carefully arrange them above the glowing embers. Then come slightly larger branches. Nothing rushed, nothing forced. You know this routine as well as your own name. For a few moments, nothing happens. Then, a single thread of smoke rises. Another. A tiny flame appears, flickers uncertainly, then disappears again. You wait patiently. Winter has taught every villager one lesson above all others. Nature refuses to be hurried. Finally, the flame returns. This time it catches firmly. It begins climbing along the dry wood, growing stronger with each passing heartbeat. Warm orange light spreads slowly across the room. The shadows retreat into distant corners. The heavy oak beams overhead begin glowing softly once more. The cottage feels alive again, and with it, so do you. The fire burns a little brighter now. Its warmth slowly pushes back the night's lingering cold, filling the cottage with the familiar scent of burning oak. You hold your hands over the flames for a moment, turning them slowly so the heat reaches stiff fingers that have only just begun to wake. Outside, the world remains wrapped in darkness. Only the faintest hint of blue has begun to appear along the eastern horizon, where dawn patiently waits beyond the rolling hills. Winter mornings arrive slowly. No one in your village expects the sun to leap into the sky. Instead, the darkness loosens its grip, little by little, revealing familiar shapes that seem to emerge from another world. The first task of every morning is water. A small iron pot hangs above the growing fire, filled yesterday before sunset. Overnight, a thin sheet of ice has formed across its surface. You tap it gently with a wooden spoon, breaking the fragile layer into floating shards that melt almost immediately as the water begins to warm. Fresh water is precious. Every bucket carried from the village well represents another journey through cold air and slippery paths. During harsh winters, many families keep enough inside the cottage to avoid venturing outdoors before sunrise. As the water heats, another member of the household begins to stir. A quiet cough, the rustle of blankets. Someone yawns softly before sitting upright, blinking into the warm glow of the fire. No one speaks at first. There is no need. The morning routine has been repeated so many times that words are unnecessary. Soon, the simple sounds of waking fill the room. A wooden cup placed upon the table, boots pulled onto tired feet, a cloak lifted from its peg, the comforting rhythm of another ordinary day. You cut a thick slice from yesterday's loaf. The bread is dense and firm, its crust hard after a cold night. Fresh bread is a luxury enjoyed only when the village baker has recently fired his oven. Most mornings begin with yesterday's bread, softened in warm broth or eaten alongside a small piece of cheese. Nothing is wasted. A family that wastes food rarely survives many winters. You eat slowly, appreciating every bite. The warmth of the fire has begun to spread through the room. though your breath still appears in pale clouds whenever you wander too far from the hearth. Outside, somewhere beyond the shuttered window, a rooster announces the coming day. Another answers from farther across the village, then another. One by one, cottages awaken, the village breathes. You fasten your wool cloak around your shoulders and lift the wooden bucket waiting beside the door. It is time to fetch fresh water. The heavy oak door groans softly as you pull it open. Cold air slips inside immediately. It carries the clean scent of snow, damp earth, and distant wood smoke. The lane before your cottage lies quiet beneath a blanket of fresh snow. Each rooftop wears a white cap, while thin streams of grey smoke rise lazily into the still morning sky. The smoke tells a reassuring story. Families are awake. Fires have been lit. Breakfast is being prepared. Life continues. Your boots leave the first fresh footprints of the morning as you begin walking toward the village well. The snow crunches gently beneath each step. To your left, a narrow fence surrounds a small garden now hidden beneath winter frost. To your right, a stack of neatly split firewood leans against another cottage wall, carefully protected beneath a simple wooden roof. Every household prepares for winter differently, yet all share the same goal: stay warm, protect the animals, reach spring. The village well stands near the small square where several roads meet. Even this early, two neighbors are already there. An elderly woman lowers her bucket carefully into the dark water below. A young man waits patiently behind her, rubbing his gloved hands together against the cold. You greet them with a quiet nod. They return the gesture. Conversation is often brief on winter mornings. The cold encourages efficiency. Yet today, something feels different. The young man glances toward the southern road, not once, but several times, as though expecting someone, or perhaps hoping no one appears. When the elderly woman notices your curious expression, she offers a small smile. "Travelers arrived late yesterday," she says quietly. Her voice is calm, though it carries a trace of uncertainty. "They came from the market town beyond the river." She lowers her own voice further. "They spoke of sickness." The word hangs in the cold air. Sickness. Not unusual in winter. Every village knows coughs, fevers, and chills when the weather grows cold. Children become ill. Old people grow weak. Some winters are kinder than others. You have seen illness before. Everyone has. "What kind of sickness?" the young man asks. The old woman slowly shakes her head. "They weren't certain." Another pause. "They only said many people had taken ill." The bucket reaches the water with a quiet splash. She begins pulling it upward, hand over hand. "The priest says we should pray." The young man exhales slowly. "I suppose we should." No one speaks for several moments. The only sounds are the rope sliding across worn wood and the gentle creak of the well's timber frame. It is impossible to know whether the travelers spoke truthfully. Roads carry stories as often as they carry goods. Some tales grow larger with every village they pass through. Others fade before reaching the next crossroads. Merchants, pilgrims, and wandering craftsmen bring news from distant towns, but certainty is rare. Most people hear only fragments. A strange illness in one city, poor harvests in another, bandits along a forest road, a harsh winter beyond the mountains. Such stories come and go like changing weather. Still, something about this one lingers in your thoughts. Not because you believe it completely, but because the old woman herself seemed uncertain, and uncertainty is harder to dismiss than fear. You fill your own bucket. The water is painfully cold against your hands. Tiny ripples spread across its surface before becoming still once more. For a moment, you look down into the dark reflection. The face staring back appears calm. The village around you remains peaceful. Smoke rises from every chimney. Children's laughter drifts faintly from somewhere beyond the cottages. A dog barks at passing chickens. Nothing seems unusual at all. You lift the bucket and begin the short walk home. The church bell rings softly in the distance. One slow note, then another, calling the village into a new day. A day that, to now, still feels wonderfully ordinary. And yet, as you walk through the quiet lane, you cannot help but notice that more than one neighbor turns their eyes toward the southern road, before disappearing back inside. The road itself remains empty, silent. The bucket feels heavier on the journey home. Not because the water weighs any more than it did yesterday, but because winter has a way of making even familiar tasks demand a little more effort. The cold tightens your hands around the wooden handle, and each careful step reminds you that a thin layer of ice often hides beneath fresh snow. The village remains quiet. A few doors have opened since you left your cottage. Smoke rises more confidently from the chimneys now, carrying with it the comforting scent of oak, beech, and ash. Somewhere nearby, someone has begun baking bread, and the rich aroma drifts gently through the still morning air. It is one of the most reassuring smells in the medieval world. Fresh bread means another ordinary day has begun. Long before clocks become common, the village measures time through familiar sounds and scents. The ringing of church bells, the crack of an axe splitting wood, the lowing of cattle waiting to be fed, the smell of bread reaching the street from the baker's oven. These are the rhythms that shape your life. As you return to your cottage, you notice a pair of sparrows hopping beneath the eaves, searching for tiny seeds left uncovered by the snow. Even the birds seem quieter during winter, conserving precious energy for the long months ahead. You push open the cottage door with your shoulder. Warm air greets you immediately. It is not truly warm by modern standards, but after even a short walk through the frozen morning, the gentle heat from the fire feels wonderfully welcoming. The bucket is placed carefully beside the hearth. Some of the fresh water will be used for cooking, some for washing. The rest must last until another trip to the well. Every household learns to use water wisely. There are no pipes carrying endless supplies beneath the ground. Every drop has been carried by hand, often through snow, rain, or mud. You pour a little into the iron pot already hanging above the fire. Soon, small bubbles begin gathering along its bottom. Breakfast is simple: a piece of coarse rye bread, a little cheese, perhaps a handful of dried peas left from the previous harvest. If fortune has been kind, there may also be a little salted pork, carefully saved for the coldest weeks. Nothing about the meal is extravagant, yet it provides enough strength for the hours ahead. Winter allows no room for laziness. Even when the fields lie frozen beneath snow, work never truly ends. The fire must be fed, animals must be cared for, tools must be repaired, clothing must be mended before it wears through. Every task completed today makes tomorrow a little easier. You finish your meal and reach for the axe resting beside the doorway. Its wooden handle has become smooth through years of use. Generations before you have relied upon tools much like this one. They ask no questions. They simply do the work they were made to do. Outside, the morning has grown brighter. Clouds drift slowly across a pale winter sky, allowing brief patches of sunlight to sparkle upon the untouched snow. The woodpile stands against the side of the cottage, though it has grown noticeably smaller since the first heavy snowfall. You study it for a moment. Every family keeps a careful eye on its firewood. Too much burned early in the season could mean bitter nights before spring finally arrives. You kneel beside the stack. Several larger logs will need splitting before they fit comfortably inside the hearth. Planting one upright upon the chopping block, you raise the axe. For a brief moment, everything becomes still. The blade falls. The sharp crack echoes across the quiet village. The log splits neatly into two pieces. Again, another clean strike. The steady rhythm soon becomes almost meditative. Lift, breathe, swing, split. Each movement warms your body more effectively than any blanket. The cold that greeted you at sunrise begins to disappear beneath honest work. Nearby, another villager is doing much the same. Across the lane, an older man pauses between swings and offers a friendly wave. You return the gesture. Words are unnecessary. Winter teaches people to appreciate quiet companionship. You work side by side without speaking, separated only by the narrow lane and drifting curls of chimney smoke. After some time, he rests his axe upon the block and smiles. Looks like we'll have another cold night. You glance toward the sky. The air feels clear. The wind has almost disappeared. Experience tells you what that often means. Cloudless winter nights allow warmth to escape quickly. By dawn, frost will likely cover every roof once again. It certainly seems that way, you reply. The old man nods thoughtfully. I heard travelers say the winter farther south has been even harsher. Travelers again. It seems everyone has been speaking of travelers recently. You continue stacking split wood. What else did they say? The old man shrugs. Oh, the usual things. He smiles faintly. Roads washed away. Poor harvests. Illness. He says the final word almost casually, as though it belongs beside weather and broken bridges. Perhaps it does. Illness is hardly uncommon in the medieval world. People become sick every year. Children sometimes survive. Sometimes they do not. Winter coughs spread through cottages. Fevers come and go. Most villagers accept such hardships as part of life itself. Still, you remember the old woman's words beside the well. The travelers had sounded uncertain. Not frightened, uncertain. The distinction feels important somehow. The old man picks up another log. I wouldn't worry too much. He laughs softly. If we believed every story carried by merchants, dragons would live in every forest. You find yourself smiling. He's probably right. Stories change as they travel. Each village adds a little. Each traveler forgets another part. By the time news reaches your home, truth and imagination have often become impossible to separate. The conversation drifts naturally toward more ordinary matters. A broken fence needing repair, whether enough hay remains for the animals, the hope that spring might arrive a little earlier than last year. Simple concerns, the kinds of conversations shared by neighbors for countless generations. Before long, the woodpile has grown once more. Freshly split logs stand neatly stacked beneath their shelter, ready for another freezing night. You brush wood chips from your sleeves and stretch your shoulders. The work has left your hands pleasantly warm, despite the cold air. The church bell rings again in the distance. Its deep, familiar voice rolls gently across the rooftops before fading into silence. Morning is passing. The village has fully awakened now. Children chase one another between cottages. A cart creaks slowly along the main lane. Someone laughs. A dog barks enthusiastically before being called back by its owner. Looking around, it is difficult to imagine that anything could disturb such peaceful routines. Life feels steady, predictable, comfortingly familiar. Yet somewhere beyond the forests, beyond the rivers, and beyond the distant hills where the roads disappear into the horizon, events are already unfolding that will one day change villages much like yours forever. But that future remains unseen. For now, there is only the warmth of honest work, the smell of fresh-cut oak, the soft crunch of snow beneath your boots, and another ordinary winter morning, unfolding one quiet moment at a time. The sound reaches you before the market comes into view. Not the lively chorus you have known since childhood, but something quieter. The steady creak of wooden cartwheels, the occasional low murmur of conversation, a horse stamping its feet against the frozen ground. The village market has always been the heart of the community, particularly during winter. Here, news arrives alongside sacks of grain. Fresh eggs appear beside bundles of wool. Travelers exchange stories while merchants exchange coins. Even those with nothing to buy often find a reason to stop, if only to greet neighbors and hear the latest happenings beyond the village boundaries. You brush the last few wood chips from your cloak before setting off. The path leading toward the market square winds gently between timber cottages whose roofs remain covered in yesterday's snowfall. Icicles hang from the edges of several thatched roofs, glittering whenever pale winter sunlight escapes from behind the clouds. A woman sweeps fresh snow away from her doorway, using a bundle of birch branches tied tightly together. Nearby, two young boys carefully roll a wooden hoop along the lane, laughing quietly whenever it threatens to topple into the snow. Life continues. It is comforting how ordinary everything seems. As you approach the square, familiar smells greet you one by one. Fresh bread, wood smoke, a hint of leather from the cobbler's workshop, the sharp scent of newly cut pine. Someone nearby has begun roasting onions over an open fire, and the sweet aroma drifts gently through the cold air. Your stomach reminds you that breakfast was several hours ago. The market itself is smaller than those found in great cities. Only a handful of wooden stalls stand in neat rows around the open square. Most are little more than sturdy tables, protected by simple awnings against rain and snow. The baker has already sold much of his morning bread. The butcher arranges cuts of salted meat with practiced hands. Bundles of dried herbs hang outside the apothecary's small stall, filling the air with faint scents of rosemary, sage, thyme, and lavender. Each familiar face offers quiet reassurance. You greet the baker first. His flour-covered apron looks much the same as it always has. He smiles warmly while placing another loaf upon the shelf behind him. "Cold enough for you?" he asks with a laugh. You return the smile. "I was beginning to think spring had forgotten us." "So was I," he chuckles, "but winter always believes it owns the world." The conversation feels wonderfully ordinary. You purchase a small loaf, still pleasantly warm from the oven. The crust crackles softly beneath your fingers. Fresh bread remains one of life's simplest pleasures. As you continue through the market, however, you begin noticing small changes. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would alarm a stranger. Simply little things that seem slightly out of place. The fish merchant has not arrived today. His stall stands empty. A length of canvas flutters quietly in the gentle breeze where baskets of river trout would normally rest. Perhaps the roads are difficult. The river may have frozen farther upstream. It happens every winter. Yet someone nearby quietly wonders aloud why he has missed 2 market days in succession. Another merchant has fewer goods than usual. Instead of 3 barrels of apples, he has only 1. The dried fruit he normally brings has already sold out before midday. He apologizes to several disappointed customers. The caravan never arrived, he explains. They were expected 4 days ago. No one seems especially troubled. Winter roads are unpredictable. Snowdrifts block narrow passes. Bridges become dangerous. Broken wagon wheels delay journeys for days. Everyone understands such inconveniences. The afternoon sun hangs low behind a veil of thin clouds, bathing the snow-covered rooftops in soft golden light. Smoke continues rising from every chimney. Children still play. Dogs still bark. Someone nearby begins singing quietly while carrying a basket of firewood. Everything appears exactly as it should. And yet, the village feels as though it is listening. Listening for hoofbeats on distant roads. Listening for familiar wagons that have not yet arrived. Listening for news no one is certain they wish to hear. You tighten your cloak against the cold and continue toward home. The snow crunches gently beneath your boots. Behind you, the market slowly settles back into its ordinary rhythm. Ahead, the comforting glow of your own cottage waits beyond the drifting smoke. For now, the day remains peaceful, but somewhere beyond the hills, winter is carrying more than snow. It is carrying stories, and with every mile they travel, the market slowly fades behind you as you continue along the narrow lane. The afternoon has settled into that quiet hour when much of the village returns to its daily work. The excitement of the morning has passed, and the sounds around you become softer once again. A woman hangs freshly washed linen beside her cottage, hoping the crisp winter air will dry it before evening. An elderly man carefully repairs a broken wicker basket outside his doorway. A pair of children gather fallen twigs beneath an old oak tree, laughing quietly each time one of them uncovers a patch of green moss beneath the snow. The village is alive, not with haste, but with steady purpose. Life here has always been measured by small tasks completed one after another. A repaired fence, a sharpened knife, a loaf of bread cooling upon a wooden table, another armful of firewood stacked beside the door. These simple acts, repeated day after day, hold the community together far more firmly than any castle wall. As you walk, you remember that your household has nearly exhausted its supply of dried willow bark. It is a useful remedy to keep close during winter. Many villagers chew it to ease aching joints after long days in the cold. Others steep it in hot water for headaches or fever. Whether it always works is difficult to say, but generations have trusted it. and in a world where certainty is rare, tradition often becomes its own kind of comfort. The village healer lives at the edge of the settlement, where the last cottages give way to open woodland. Her home is modest, a timber cottage much like the others. Only the small garden surrounding it hints that something different lies within. Even beneath winter's blanket of snow, neat rows of carefully marked beds can still be seen. Bundles of herbs hang beneath the shelter of the roof, drying slowly despite the cold. Some you recognize, others are unfamiliar. Rosemary, sage, thyme, mint, lavender, yarrow. Each has its purpose. Each has a story passed from one generation to the next. Thin ribbons of fragrant smoke drift lazily from the chimney. When you knock gently upon the wooden door, a calm voice answers, "Come in." The room inside feels warmer than you expected. The fire burns steadily within a stone hearth, while shelves line nearly every wall. Clay jars, glass bottles, bundles of dried plants tied with coarse twine, small wooden boxes carefully labeled in faded ink. The air carries a rich mixture of scents. Earth, honey, dried flowers, wood smoke, something slightly bitter that you cannot immediately identify. The healer looks up from her work and smiles. Her hands continue sorting dried leaves into a woven basket. "You've come for willow bark." It is not a question. You smile in return. "You always seem to know." She laughs softly. "Most people do this time of year." She gestures toward a nearby stool. "Sit by the fire for a moment." You gladly accept. The warmth reaches your hands almost immediately. For several moments, neither of you speaks. There is no need. The quiet crackling of burning logs fills the little cottage. Eventually, she begins wrapping several strips of dried willow bark inside a square of linen cloth. "It has been a colder winter than most," she says. "So it seems." She nods thoughtfully. "The cold keeps people indoors. Sometimes that helps. Sometimes it does not." You notice several unfamiliar herbs spread across the table before her. "What are those?" She lifts one carefully. "And dried horehound. They're often brewed into warm drinks for those with coughs." She pauses. Though whether the herbs heal the illness, or simply comfort the person, only God truly knows. Her honesty surprises you. Many people speak confidently about remedies. She does not. Instead, she speaks with quiet humility. You ask how she learned so much. She smiles toward the shelves surrounding her. "My mother, and her mother before her. Some things were also taught by monks. The monastery keeps many old books, though books alone are poor teachers." She gently crushes several dried leaves between her fingers. "You must learn to watch, to listen, to notice. Every person is different. It is wisdom earned through years rather than written upon parchment." Outside, a raven calls from somewhere among the bare trees. Its deep voice echoes briefly before fading into silence. You watch as the healer fills another small pouch. "People have been asking many questions recently." She says it almost absent-mindedly. "About illness." You glance toward her. "Because of the travelers?" She nods slowly. "They have brought many stories. Some villagers believe foul air carries sickness. Others believe certain stars have changed. A few think punishment has come for mankind's sins." She shrugs gently. "I have lived long enough to know that fear often spreads faster than illness itself." The words remain with you. Fear spreads faster than illness. Outside these cottage walls, no one yet knows exactly what is happening beyond the distant towns. Only fragments have arrived. Rumors carried from market to market, each slightly different from the last. Some undoubtedly exaggerated, others perhaps not. You ask whether she believes the stories. She takes a long moment before answering. "I believe people become frightened whenever they cannot explain something." Another pause. "And sometimes, the unknown is heavier than the truth." The fire shifts quietly inside the hearth. A shower of tiny sparks rises before disappearing into the chimney. You notice a simple wooden cross hanging above the mantel. Beside it rests a worn handwritten prayer upon yellowed parchment. Faith and healing live side by side here. Not because people understand every illness, but because hope itself is sometimes a form of medicine. The healer finishes tying the small bundle of willow bark and places it gently into your hands. "There, that should last until spring." You thank her warmly and reach for a few small coins. She accepts only part of what you offer. The rest, she says with a smile, buy your family another loaf of bread. As you prepare to leave, she opens the cottage door. The cold winter air returns at once. Snowflakes have begun drifting gently from the pale afternoon sky. Not many, just enough to soften the distant fields. You pause for a moment, before stepping outside. The healer looks toward the falling snow. It will be beautiful by morning. Then, after a thoughtful silence, she quietly adds, whatever tomorrow brings, people will still need kindness. You nod. Somehow those simple words feel more important than any remedy upon her shelves. You tuck the small bundle safely inside your cloak and begin the walk back toward the village. Behind you, the little cottage slowly disappears among the trees. Ahead, smoke continues rising from familiar chimneys. The church bell rings once, deep and steady. Children's laughter drifts faintly across the snow. The world still appears peaceful. Yet as the first fresh flakes settle upon your shoulders, you find yourself wondering how many more stories will arrive with the next group of travelers. For now, there are only whispers, only questions, only the quiet uncertainty that settles over a village, before anyone fully understands that history is already on its way. The afternoon light grows softer as you leave the healer's cottage behind. Snow continues to fall, though only lightly now. Tiny flakes drift lazily through the still air, settling upon rooftops, fences, and the branches of leafless trees. Before long, your own footprints begin disappearing beneath a fresh dusting of white. Winter has a quiet way of erasing the traces of the day. By tomorrow morning, the lane may look untouched once again, as though no one had walked here at all. You pull your cloak a little tighter around your shoulders and make your way toward the village mill. The path follows a narrow stream that never quite freezes, even during the coldest weeks of winter. Thin ribbons of mist rise from the moving water, twisting gently before vanishing into the crisp afternoon air. The sound of the stream is comforting, a steady murmur beneath the silence. Water has always been one of the village's greatest treasures. It turns the mill wheel, it provides drinking water, it washes clothing, it shapes the rhythm of everyday life, just as surely as the church bell. Soon, the mill comes into view. Its large wooden wheel turns slowly against the current, each rotation accompanied by the familiar groan of old timber that has weathered countless winters. Inside, the miller is already at work. The deep rumble of heavy millstones fills the building with a constant, reassuring sound. Grain disappears between the great circular stones and emerges as fine flour, pale as fresh snow. The mill smells of grain, timber, and warm dust. Sunlight slips through narrow windows, catching tiny particles that float lazily in the air like golden snowflakes. The miller looks up and smiles as you enter. Good afternoon, and to you. He brushes flour from his beard with a laugh. I seem to carry half the harvest home with me every evening. You smile. It is impossible not to. His cheerful nature has changed little over the years. No matter how harsh the winter or poor the harvest, he always finds something to laugh about. He gestures toward the turning stones. They never stop. You watch the great millstones revolve, slowly, patiently, hour after hour. They cannot, he continues. If they stop, the village stops. There is truth in his words. Without flour, there is no bread. Without bread, there are hungry families. The work of one person quietly supports dozens of others. The village depends upon countless people performing ordinary tasks every single day. The blacksmith shapes iron, the carpenter repairs roofs, the baker prepares bread before dawn, the shepherd watches over sheep, the miller grinds grain. Each role may seem small on its own. Together, they allow the entire community to endure another winter. As you prepare to leave, another villager arrives, carrying 2 heavy sacks of barley across his shoulders. He sets them down with a weary sigh. Busy as always, he asks the miller. When is it ever otherwise? The 2 men share a quiet laugh. Their conversation soon turns toward weather, as conversations often do during winter. Looks like more snow. So it does. And perhaps colder nights. I believe you're right. Then, almost as an afterthought, the newcomer says, my brother returned from the next market town yesterday. The room grows just a little quieter. He says several families there have remained indoors. The miller pauses briefly. Because of the weather? The man hesitates. Perhaps, or perhaps because of illness. No one replies immediately. Instead, the steady rumble of the millstones fills the silence. Round and round they turn, just as they did yesterday, just as they will tomorrow. Eventually the miller speaks. Whatever happens beyond our village, people here will still need bread. It is a simple observation, yet it carries remarkable strength. Life cannot simply pause. Children will wake hungry tomorrow. Animals must still be fed. Wood must still be chopped. The fire must still be kept alive. You step outside once more. The air feels colder than before. Clouds have thickened overhead, softening what little sunlight remains. Across the village green, several children continue playing despite the snow. They have built a small fortress from packed drifts and defend it with handfuls of powdery snow, laughing whenever one of their careful walls collapses. Their laughter echoes across the square, bright, carefree. For a moment, every rumor feels very far away. Nearby, an elderly woman scatters grain for a small flock of chickens, scratching determinedly through the snow. The birds seem entirely unconcerned with the worries of mankind. They search only for the next seed, the next meal, the next quiet corner sheltered from the wind. There is something oddly comforting about their certainty. Nature continues. It always has. You continue walking toward the blacksmith's forge. Long before you reach it, the familiar ringing reaches your ears. Clang, a pause. Clang, another pause. The rhythm is slower than in the morning, but no less steady. Inside the workshop, the blacksmith stands before the glowing forge. His face shines orange in the firelight, while sparks leap upward each time his hammer strikes the heated iron. A young apprentice works nearby, pumping the great leather bellows that feed air into the fire. With each steady push, the coals glow brighter. The heat inside the forge is almost overwhelming after the winter air outside. You remove your gloves and hold your hands toward the warmth. The blacksmith notices. "Come to steal my fire," he jokes. "Only for a moment. Take as much as you like." He smiles without looking away from his work. There will always be more. You watch him shape the iron with patient precision. There is no rushing, no wasted movement. Each strike has purpose. The apprentice mirrors his master's concentration, carefully watching every motion. Skills like these are not learned from books. They are passed from one pair of hands to another, one generation teaching the next. Outside, the church bell sounds again. Its deep note rolls gently across the rooftops. The blacksmith lowers his hammer. For just a heartbeat, everyone becomes still, almost instinctively. Then the work resumes. Iron continues to ring. The bellows breathe. The fire crackles. Life moves forward. You step back into the snowy lane. The afternoon is beginning to fade. Long blue shadows stretch across the snow as the pale winter sun slowly sinks toward the western hills. Thin curls of smoke rise peacefully from every chimney. Somewhere, supper is already being prepared. Somewhere else, a father returns home carrying another armful of firewood. A shepherd guides his flock toward shelter before darkness falls. A mother calls softly for her children to come inside. The village feels warm despite the cold, connected, resilient. The stories carried by travelers may continue to spread from town to town. More whispers may arrive tomorrow, or next week, or not at all. But this evening, there is work to finish, a fire to tend, a meal to share, and another winter night to face together. You turn toward your cottage, the familiar path already glowing with the golden light spilling from small shuttered windows. Home is waiting, and for now, home is enough. By the time you reach your cottage, the afternoon has begun its slow surrender to evening. Winter days are never generous with their sunlight. The pale sun hangs low above the western hills, casting long blue shadows across the snow-covered lanes. Every rooftop seems to glow softly beneath the fading light, while the smoke rising from countless chimneys turns golden for just a few precious moments before disappearing into the cold sky. You pause outside your door. The village is beautiful at this hour. Not because it is grand, not because it is wealthy, but because everything seems to belong exactly where it should. A cart rests beside the cooper's workshop. Fresh footprints weave between cottages. The frozen stream reflects the fading light like polished silver. Somewhere nearby, someone begins singing quietly while stacking firewood. It is an old hymn, one you have heard many times before. The melody drifts gently through the still air before being carried away by the wind. For many in your village, songs like these are as familiar as breathing. Faith is not reserved for Sundays alone. It lives in ordinary moments. It is whispered before meals, spoken before sleep, remembered during difficult journeys, shared whenever harvests are poor or winters feel especially long. The church stands at the highest point of the village. Its stone tower rises above the surrounding cottages, visible from nearly every field and woodland path. You decide to climb the gentle slope before darkness settles completely. The path is quiet. Snow muffles every footstep. Only the distant caw of a rook interrupts the silence as it circles briefly above the bare branches before disappearing toward the forest. The churchyard comes into view. Rows of simple wooden crosses and weathered stone markers rest beneath a blanket of snow. Some lean slightly with age. Others have stood for generations. No two are quite alike. Each represents a life once lived in this same village. Farmers, mothers, children, carpenters, shepherds. People whose names are spoken less often now, but whose work shapes the community that still endures. A light snowfall has softened every edge. The church itself appears almost timeless. Its thick stone walls have resisted countless winters. Moss clings stubbornly between the weathered stones, while narrow stained glass windows glow faintly from the candlelight burning within. You push open the heavy oak door. Warmth greets you immediately. Not the deep warmth of a roaring fire, but the gentle comfort created by dozens of flickering candles and the quiet presence of other villagers. The scent inside is unmistakable. Beeswax, old timber, stone, a trace of incense lingering from an earlier service. The familiar smell of centuries. The nave is dimly lit. Golden candlelight dances across rough stone pillars, filling every corner with soft shadows that seem to move gently as the flames flicker. Several villagers kneel quietly upon worn wooden benches. Heads bowed, hands folded. No one speaks. The silence here feels different from the silence outside. Outside, silence belongs to winter. Inside, it belongs to reflection. You remove your gloves and sit for a moment. The polished wood beneath your hands has been worn smooth by countless generations. How many people have rested here before you? How many offered quiet prayers before beginning another difficult day? How many found comfort simply by sitting in this peaceful place? It is impossible to know. The village priest notices your arrival. He approaches slowly, offering the same gentle smile he gives everyone. And to you, Father. He sits beside you for a moment. Neither of you feels any need to rush into conversation. Outside, another church bell rings softly. The deep note vibrates through the stone walls before fading into silence. Finally, the priest speaks. It has been a thoughtful week. You nod. It has. He watches the candles for several moments. People have many questions. Again, you nod. So do I. He smiles kindly. Questions are not the enemy. Sometimes they simply remind us that we are human. His words settle comfortably between you. You ask whether he believes the stories arriving from distant towns. The priest takes his time before answering. I believe people are suffering somewhere. That much seems certain. As for everything else, he gently folds his hands. Only time reveals the whole truth. There is wisdom in such restraint. Many people rush to certainty. He does not. Instead, he chooses patience. Around you, villagers continue arriving one by one. A shepherd removes his wool cap before kneeling near the front. A young mother lights a candle beside a small wooden cross. An elderly couple quietly share a prayer together before taking seats near the aisle. No one appears frightened, only thoughtful. Faith, you realize, is not always about having answers. Often, It is simply about finding enough peace to continue living without them. The choir loft above remains empty today. There is no formal service, only scattered villagers seeking a quiet place before nightfall. You notice a large illuminated manuscript resting upon a carved wooden stand. Its pages have been copied carefully by hand. Every letter, every illustration. Months, perhaps years of patient work. Books like these are precious beyond measure. Very few people will ever own one. Most knowledge travels instead through memory, through conversation, through stories shared beside warm fires after the day's work has ended. The priest rises. I should prepare for evening prayers. You thank him for his time. Before leaving, he places a gentle hand upon your shoulder. Whatever tomorrow brings, remember that kindness travels farther than fear. The words remind you of the village healer. Different people, different lives, yet remarkably similar wisdom. Outside once again, evening has settled fully across the valley. The sky glows deep blue overhead. The first stars begin appearing between drifting clouds. Fresh snow sparkles beneath the pale light of a rising moon. The village seems quieter now. Warm light shines through shuttered windows. Families gather around their evening fires. Some prepare supper. Others mend clothing or sharpen tools for tomorrow. A father carries his sleeping child home from the church. The little one's head rests peacefully against his shoulder, and the village settles into a calm nightfall. Completely unaware of the whispered conversations that have occupied so many adults in recent days. Perhaps that is a blessing. Children have a remarkable gift. They live almost entirely in the present. Tomorrow belongs to tomorrow. As you begin walking home, your breath rises in gentle clouds before disappearing into the cold night air. The church bell rings one final time. Its sound spreads slowly across the snowy fields, over frozen streams, and into the dark forest beyond. For a few quiet moments, the entire village seems to pause, not from fear, but from gratitude. Gratitude for warm homes, for shared meals, for neighbors, for another day safely reaching its end. Whatever stories may still be traveling the distant roads, tonight, beneath the peaceful winter sky, your village remains a place of quiet hope. The path home feels familiar beneath your boots. Even in the fading light, you scarcely need to think about where your feet are carrying you. Every bend in the lane, every leaning fence post, every ancient oak standing beside the road has become part of your memory over many winters. The village has begun to settle for the evening. Doors close one by one against the growing cold. Wooden shutters are fastened carefully over narrow windows, keeping precious warmth inside while the wind wanders freely through the empty lanes. Above every cottage, thin columns of smoke rise steadily into the darkening sky. Each chimney tells the same quiet story. A fire has been lit, supper is being prepared. Another family has gathered safely indoors. The smell of burning oak hangs gently in the crisp evening air, mixed with the comforting aromas drifting from dozens of kitchens. Fresh bread, stewing onions, barley porridge, a little cabbage, perhaps a strip of salted bacon if fortune has smiled upon the household this winter. The scents mingle together until the entire village seems wrapped in a blanket of warmth. You reach your own cottage. The familiar oak door creaks softly as you push it open. Immediately, a wave of gentle heat greets your face. The fire has grown stronger since morning. Bright flames dance around thick oak logs, casting warm orange light across the timber walls. The cottage feels alive. The worries carried by the cold remain outside. Here the fire stands watch over everyone gathered within. A heavy iron pot hangs above the hearth. Its contents bubble gently. Steam curls upward before disappearing into the smoky air near the roof beams. The smell is simple, yet deeply satisfying. A thick pottage made from barley, onions, carrots, and dried peas. Nothing extravagant, nothing wasteful. Simply the sort of meal that has carried countless families through long winters. A small piece of salted pork has been added today. Not enough to feed everyone generously, only enough to lend its rich flavor to the broth. In medieval homes, meat is often more valuable as seasoning, that is the meal itself. Every scrap is used carefully. Nothing is allowed to go to waste. You remove your cloak and hang it beside the door. Tiny drops of melting snow fall quietly onto the packed earth floor. Nearby, damp gloves have already been laid close enough to the hearth to dry, but not so close that the leather will crack from the heat. These little habits have been learned through experience. Winter has always been an unforgiving teacher. Around the table, the family prepares for the evening meal. Wooden bowls are placed carefully before each seat. Simple spoons carved from ashwood rest beside them. There are no matching sets. Each bowl bears the marks of years of daily use. Small scratches, tiny chips along the rim, a polished shine where countless hands have held them. Objects like these are not merely possessions. They become companions through the passing seasons. The youngest child watches the pot with patient determination. Every few moments, curious eyes glance toward the rising steam. You cannot help but smile. Hunger makes excellent observers of children. An older member of the family stirs the pottage slowly with a long wooden spoon. The movement is steady and unhurried. The meal will be ready when it is ready. Life in the village has taught everyone patience. Bread rises in its own time. Wood seasons in its own time. The seasons themselves refuse to be hurried. At last, the pot is lifted carefully from the fire. The room fills with an even richer aroma. One by one, bowls are filled. Steam rises in soft clouds before every face. You wrap both hands around your bowl for a moment before taking the first spoonful. The warmth spreads through your fingers first, then your chest. After hours spent outdoors, few comforts compare with warm food shared beside a fire. Conversation begins quietly. No one speaks over another. There is no urgency. The day's work is finished. Tomorrow can wait until morning. Someone mentions the snowfall. It seems lighter now. Another nods. If the roads remain clear, perhaps more traders will arrive before week's end. The thought lingers around the table. Travelers, again. Nearly every conversation seems to return there eventually. Not because anyone wishes to dwell upon rumors, but because distant roads have become the village's only connection to events beyond the surrounding forests. One family member recalls hearing stories from a peddler many years ago. He claimed wolves larger than horses lived beyond the mountains. Gentle laughter circles the room. And did you believe him? I was 10. Of course I did. The laughter grows a little louder. For a few wonderful moments, every rumor loses its power. Stories become stories again. The youngest child asks whether wolves truly can grow that large. An older voice answers with a smile. Only in tales told beside winter fires, or sought dried beans for tomorrow's meal. Evening is not a time of idleness. It is simply a time for quieter work. Work that does not require daylight. As your hands become busy with simple tasks, your thoughts wander gently back through the day. The well, the market, the healer, the church, the conversations, the travelers, the whispers. They seem strangely distant now. Not forgotten, only softened by the comfort of home. You realize something that perhaps every generation has discovered. The world beyond your village may always carry uncertainty. There will always be storms somewhere beyond the horizon. Always rumors traveling unfamiliar roads. Always questions without immediate answers. Yet inside this small cottage, there is warmth, there is bread, there is family, and for this one quiet evening, that is enough. Outside, snow continues falling in silence. The village disappears little by little beneath another fresh white blanket. Tomorrow morning, every rooftop will sparkle once more. The lanes will be smooth again. Fresh footprints will mark the beginning of another day. For now, however, the fire burns steadily. Voices grow quieter. The night deepens beyond the shuttered windows. And the little cottage, no larger than many modern rooms, becomes the whole world. Night arrives gently. There is no sudden darkness. Instead, the last traces of daylight slowly surrender to deep shades of blue. And one by one, the The familiar landmarks of the village begin to soften beneath the quiet embrace of evening. The great oak beside the well becomes little more than a silhouette. The rooftops lose their sharp edges beneath fresh snow. Even the distant forest seems to step backward into the growing darkness, until only its highest trees remain visible against the sky. Inside your cottage, however, another day is far from over. The fire still burns steadily. Its light dances across the timber walls, making the familiar room seem almost alive. Every flicker of flame sends shadows gently climbing across the ceiling before retreating once more. Firelight has a curious way of changing ordinary things. A wooden stool becomes something ancient. A clay pot seems almost golden. Even the rough oak beams overhead appear softer beneath the warm glow. You reach for another log from the neatly stacked pile beside the hearth. The wood has been drying since late summer. Months of careful preparation have brought it to this moment. You place the log upon the glowing embers. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then, a tiny orange flame reaches upward. It catches, slowly, patiently. Soon the new log begins to burn, releasing the comforting scent of seasoned oak into the room. There is quiet satisfaction in tending a good fire. It is a task repeated every evening, yet it never feels unimportant. The warmth it provides is more than comfort. It is protection against the cold, against dampness, against the endless winter waiting just beyond the walls. One by one, the day's smaller tasks are finished. The repaired clothing is folded neatly into a wooden chest. The last of the dried beans are stored safely away. The iron cooking pot is returned to its hook above the hearth, ready for tomorrow morning. Nothing is left scattered. Order matters. A well-kept cottage saves time when dawn arrives. Outside, the wind has almost disappeared entirely. The silence is remarkable. Modern evenings are rarely so still. There are no engines, no distant traffic, no electric lights humming softly through the darkness. Only nature remains awake. Somewhere beyond the village, an owl calls from the forest. Its low, haunting note echoes briefly across the frozen fields before fading once more into silence. Another answers from farther away. The conversation between them is brief. Then all is quiet again. You step outside for a moment. The cold greets you immediately. It is sharper now than at any point during the day. The kind of cold that causes each breath to appear like pale smoke beneath the stars. Above you stretches a sky unlike almost anything the modern world allows. Without city lights to dim them, thousands upon thousands of stars cover the heavens. The familiar ribbon of the Milky Way stretches from one horizon to the other, bright enough to cast the faintest suggestion of light upon the snowy fields. For many people in your village, these stars are more than beautiful. They are companions, guides for travelers, markers of the seasons, reminders that the heavens continue their patient journey no matter what happens below. You find yourself looking upward for several quiet moments. Somewhere beyond those stars lies a universe no one yet understands. The monks speak of heavenly order. Travelers tell stories of strange lights crossing the night sky. Farmers simply notice which stars rise before dawn, knowing they often announce the changing seasons. Each person sees something different, yet all stand beneath the same sky. A gentle crunch of snow draws your attention. An elderly neighbor walks slowly along the lane, carrying a small lantern. The warm glow illuminates only a few steps ahead before fading into darkness. He notices you and raises a hand in greeting. Beautiful evening. It certainly is. He pauses beside the fence separating your cottages. We've not had skies this clear in many weeks. You nod. The frost will be heavy by morning. He smiles knowingly. It usually is after nights like this. For several moments, the two of you simply admire the stars together. There is no need for constant conversation. Silence is not uncomfortable here. It is simply another part of life. Eventually, he clears his throat. My nephew returned from the abbey this afternoon. You glance toward him. He says more travelers have arrived from the south. You wait. They carried difficult news. His voice remains calm, not fearful, merely thoughtful. No one seems to know exactly what is happening. You think of the healer's words. The unknown is often heavier than the truth. Your neighbor sighs gently. I suppose we'll know soon enough. Perhaps, or perhaps not. The roads have always carried uncertainty. Messages become tangled between villages. Days pass before news reaches its destination. Even kings sometimes wait weeks to learn what has happened in distant parts of their own kingdoms. For ordinary villagers, patience is not simply a virtue, it is a necessity. You wish one another a peaceful night before returning to your own homes. The little lantern disappears slowly into the darkness, its warm light growing smaller until it vanishes completely around a bend in the lane. You remain outside a little longer. The village sleeps, not entirely. A faint glow still shines beneath one or two shutters. Somewhere, a baby cries before quickly being comforted. A dog barks once in the distance, then settles again. Otherwise, stillness. The snow reflects the starlight with surprising brightness. Every rooftop, every fence, every field, everything seems wrapped in quiet silver. It is difficult to imagine a more peaceful place. And yet, beyond the forests, beyond the rivers, beyond the winding roads that disappear into darkness, countless other villages are also preparing for sleep. Families gather around their own fires. Travelers seek shelter in roadside inns. Monks finish their evening prayers. Merchants secure their wagons before dawn's journey. None of them can fully see what tomorrow holds. Neither can you. History rarely announces itself with trumpets. More often, it approaches as quietly as falling snow. One ordinary day becomes another. One conversation follows the next. Life continues so naturally that few notice the moment when the world begins to change. You take one last look across the sleeping village. Warm windows glow softly through the darkness. Smoke rises lazily into the cold night air. The church tower stands silent beneath the stars. Everything feels peaceful, wonderfully ordinary. You return inside and gently close the heavy oak door behind you. The warmth of the hearth welcomes you once again. Tomorrow will arrive soon enough. For now, there is only the fire, the quiet breathing of those already asleep, and the comforting knowledge that, for one more winter night, your little corner of the world remains wrapped in peace. Morning arrives beneath a sky the color of polished pewter. The snow that fell through the night has settled into a smooth white blanket across the village. Every rooftop wears a fresh covering, and the narrow lanes have once again erased yesterday's footprints. For a few peaceful moments, it almost seems as though the world has begun anew. You wake before the first church bell, just as you did yesterday. The cottage is still. Only the gentle crackling of the fire reminds you that someone rose during the night to place another log upon the embers. The warmth has lasted until dawn. It is a small blessing. Winter often teaches gratitude through the simplest comforts. A warm fire, dry boots, fresh bread. The familiar faces gathered beneath the same roof. Outside, the air is wonderfully still. Not a single branch moves in the forest beyond the village. The smoke rising from each chimney climbs almost perfectly straight into the pale morning sky, before slowly fading from sight. Days like this are rare, beautiful, quiet, almost timeless. You pull on your wool cloak and step into the crisp morning air. The snow squeaks softly beneath your boots, a sound that only comes when the cold has grown particularly sharp. The village has not fully awakened. Only a few windows glow with candlelight. Somewhere nearby, a rooster calls once, before falling silent again. The frozen world seems content to linger between night and day. You make your way toward the village well. As always, several neighbors are already there. Water waits for no one. The elderly woman you spoke with yesterday smiles as she lowers her bucket into the darkness. You are early. So are you. She laughs quietly. My knees wake before the sun these days. The rope creaks gently over the worn wooden beam. Its familiar sound has echoed through this village for longer than anyone can remember. Every generation has drawn water here. Children who once struggled to lift a bucket have grown into parents. Parents into grandparents. The well has watched them all. As you begin filling your own bucket, another sound reaches the square. At first, it is almost too faint to notice. A distant rhythm. Slow, Steady. Hoofbeats. Several heads lift at the same moment. The sound grows a little louder. Not hurried, not frantic. Simply the measured pace of a tired horse traveling frozen roads. Everyone turns toward the southern lane. Beyond the last cottages, a single rider slowly appears through the morning mist. The horse carries patches of frozen mud along its legs, evidence of many miles traveled over winter roads. Its breath hangs in great white clouds before its muzzle. The rider sits heavily in the saddle. His cloak is dusted with old snow. His boots bear the pale stains left behind by frozen salt and slush. Even from a distance, he looks exhausted. Medieval villages have learned patience. Travelers arrive almost every week. Merchants, messengers, pilgrims, craftsmen. Some remain only long enough to water their horses before continuing onward. Others stay for several days. Only when the rider reaches the edge of the square does the innkeeper step forward. "You've come a long way," he says. The stranger nods wearily. "Farther than I expected." His voice is rough from cold air and long hours on lonely roads. The innkeeper gently takes the horse's reins. "You'll both want warmth." The traveler smiles faintly. "I believe you're right." Several villagers quietly return to their morning work. Others remain where they are, pretending not to listen while listening very carefully. Travelers are living libraries. Every journey carries news. Every road connects one village to another. Most people never travel more than a few days from the place where they were born. Instead, the world comes to them. The stranger accepts a wooden cup of warm ale outside the inn before removing his heavy gloves. His fingers are red from the cold. He warms them slowly around the cup. No one immediately asks questions. That would be considered impolite. First comes warmth, then food. Only afterward does conversation naturally begin. The blacksmith arrives carrying a bundle of horseshoes awaiting repair. Bad roads? The traveler lets out a tired breath. Worse than usual. The river crossing south of Ashford froze. We lost nearly half a day. The blacksmith nods knowingly. It happens every winter. It does. For a few moments the conversation remains comfortably ordinary. Snow, roads, broken wagon wheels, hungry horses, the everyday difficulties shared by anyone who travels during winter. Then, almost absent-mindedly, the innkeeper asks, "And how are things farther south?" The traveler looks into the steaming cup held between his hands, long enough that several villagers notice. They're quieter. Only that. Quieter. What do you mean? He searches for the right words. Some villages feel different. The markets aren't as busy. More houses have their shutters closed. The churches are fuller than they were last autumn. His voice remains calm, matter of fact. He is describing what he has seen, not attempting to frighten anyone. Do they know why? The traveler slowly shakes his head. Everyone has an explanation. No two explanations are the same. A few villagers exchange thoughtful glances. The healer's words return to your mind. People become frightened whenever they cannot explain something. The traveler continues. One priest blamed the cold. A merchant blamed spoiled grain. A physician spoke of unhealthy air. He gives a small shrug. I simply know what I saw. The village grows quiet. Not silent. Children still laugh somewhere beyond the cottages. The mill wheel still turns beside the stream. The blacksmith's hammer rings across the square. Life continues. Yet the conversation settles gently over everyone present. Not like a storm. More like fresh snow. Soft. Quiet. Impossible to ignore. The innkeeper finally smiles. Well, you've reached a peaceful village. We'll see that you have a hot meal. The traveler's tired face softens. I've been looking forward to that since sunrise. A ripple of gentle laughter moves through the group. The tension eases. Someone leads the horse toward the stable. Another villager offers to brush the snow from its saddle. Acts of kindness come naturally here, especially during winter, especially towards strangers who have spent long days on dangerous roads. As the traveler disappears inside the inn, the square slowly returns to its familiar rhythm. Buckets continue rising from the well. Fresh bread emerges from the bakery. Smoke climbs lazily from every chimney. The church bell rings across the village. Another ordinary morning. And yet for the first time, the stories no longer belong only to distant travelers passing from village to village. Now they have a face, a tired man, a weary horse, mud frozen upon worn leather boots. Simple details, quiet details, the sort of details that make even the farthest rumors feel just a little closer to home. You lift your bucket and begin the walk back toward your cottage. The village still feels peaceful. The snow still sparkles beneath the pale winter sun. The air still smells of wood smoke and fresh bread. But as you pass the inn, you find yourself wondering what other roads the traveler has walked, and what other stories still remain untold. Morning arrives beneath a veil of quiet clouds. The sharp brilliance of yesterday's sunrise has given way to a softer light, one that spreads gently across the snow-covered fields without casting harsh shadows. The air is still cold, but there is a hint of moisture carried upon the breeze, the sort that promises more snow before the day is finished. You wake to the familiar sounds of home. Someone is already feeding another log into the hearth. A kettle begins to murmur as water warms above the fire. The scent of toasted barley slowly fills the little cottage. It is comforting how little has changed. Outside, the church bell marks the beginning of another day with its steady, measured voice. One note, then another. The sound drifts across the village, passing over rooftops, frozen gardens, and sleeping animals tucked safely inside their shelters. For generations, those bells have welcomed each new morning. They ask for nothing. They simply remind everyone that another day has begun. After a simple breakfast, you step outside. Fresh snow has covered the lane during the night, smoothing away yesterday's footprints once again. Only a narrow path has been cleared between the cottages where the earliest villagers have already passed. Winter has a remarkable habit of making every morning feel like a fresh beginning. Near the well, you notice more people than usual. Not because of alarm, rather because neighbors have begun helping one another with the heavier work. An elderly widow struggles to carry 2 buckets of water. Before she can lift the second one, a young carpenter quietly picks it up without being asked. "I can manage," she says with a smile. "I know you can," he replies gently. "But today, let me help." She thanks him, and together they make their way toward her cottage. No one applauds, no one comments. Such kindness is simply part of village life. It has always been so. In difficult winters, survival depends less upon strength than upon cooperation. One family may have extra firewood, another may have more grain than they need, a third may own a sturdy horse capable of pulling heavy loads through deep snow. Few households possess everything. Together, however, the village has enough. You continue toward the baker's workshop. Long before you reach the doorway, the familiar smell of fresh bread welcomes you. The ovens have been burning since long before dawn. Warm air escapes each time the heavy wooden door opens, carrying with it the comforting aroma of rye and barley flour. Inside, the baker works with practiced rhythm. He kneads another mound of dough, while his eldest daughter slides finished loaves onto wooden shelves. Her younger brother carefully brushes flour from the work table before preparing the next batch. It is a family effort, as most work is. The baker looks up as you enter. You're just in time, placing a fresh loaf upon the counter. "I've made a few more than usual today." "You have?" He nods. The traveler mentioned another snowfall before week's end. He brushes flour from his hands. "And people always eat a little more when they expect to remain indoors." His explanation seems perfectly reasonable. Perhaps that is all there is to it. Or perhaps everyone has quietly begun preparing for uncertainty in their own small way. No one speaks of fear. Instead, they bake another loaf, split another log, fill another bucket. Quiet preparations, practical ones, the sort that have carried villages through difficult seasons for centuries. Leaving the bakery, you find the blacksmith standing outside his forge. Instead of horseshoes, he is repairing the iron hinges of a farmer's gate. Nearby, an apprentice carefully sharpens pruning knives that will not be needed until spring. The blacksmith notices your curiosity. Best to mend things while there's still time. He tests the edge of one blade against his thumb. Winter gives us fewer hours in the fields. It also gives us time to prepare. His words seem true in more ways than one. Preparation has become the quiet theme of the village. Not frantic preparation, simply careful attention, fences repaired before storms, roofs checked before heavy snow, lanterns cleaned, grain counted, herbs dried. Everyone continues their work, yet each task now carries a slightly deeper sense of purpose. As the morning passes, you see the village healer making her rounds. Her basket hangs over one arm, filled with bundles of herbs wrapped neatly in linen. She stops first at the cottage of an elderly couple. Later, she visits a young mother whose child has developed a winter cough. At every home, her visit follows the same gentle pattern. She listens, she asks questions, she offers what remedies she can, and just as importantly, she offers reassurance. Sometimes the greatest comfort comes not from medicine itself, but from knowing someone has taken the time to knock upon your door. Near midday, the priest walks slowly through the village square. He carries no grand sermon today. Instead, he stops to greet each person he meets. A few quiet words, a warm smile, a hand resting briefly upon an old friend's shoulder. His presence alone seems to lighten the mood. In small communities, leadership often looks less like standing before crowds and more like walking patiently beside neighbors. Children continue to play despite the cold. Two boys pull one another across the snow on a small wooden sled. A little girl carefully builds a tiny house from packed snow beside the church wall. Their laughter echoes across the square, bright, untroubled. For a few moments, every whispered rumor fades beneath those happy voices. Watching them, you are reminded that children measure time differently from adults. They care little for distant roads or uncertain news. Their world is wonderfully immediate. Snow worth throwing, bread worth eating, stories worth hearing before bed. Perhaps there is wisdom in that. By afternoon, clouds have thickened once again. Large snowflakes begin drifting lazily from the sky. No one hurries indoors. Instead, villagers simply pull their hoods a little closer and continue with whatever task lies before them. A shepherd leads his flock toward shelter. The cooper rolls another finished barrel beneath an awning. The mill wheel turns without complaint beside the half-frozen stream. Life continues, not because people ignore uncertainty, but because life has always demanded courage, disguised as ordinary routine. As you make your way home, the village seems somehow warmer than it did a few days ago. Not warmer because the weather has changed. If anything, the air has grown colder. It is warmer because neighbors have drawn a little closer together. Kindness has become more visible. Conversations linger a little longer. Doors open more readily. Extra bread is shared. Firewood appears quietly beside the homes of those who need it most. No one speaks of these things as remarkable. They are simply what decent people do. And perhaps that is one of history's quieter truths. When uncertainty arrives, the first response is often not panic. It is compassion. Long before kingdoms issue orders, long before scholars write explanations, long before history records the names of famous rulers, ordinary people help one another carry water, share warm bread, repair a neighbor's fence, sit beside the sick, light another candle against the darkness. These small acts rarely appear in history books, yet they are often the very things that carry communities through their hardest seasons. As evening begins to settle over the village once more, you look back across the snowy lanes. Smoke rises peacefully into the grey sky. The church bell rings its familiar hour. Somewhere, someone begins chopping wood for the night. The traveller remains safely at the inn. The baker's ovens slowly cool after another day's work. The healer returns home with an empty basket. And for one more winter evening, the village stands together. Several mornings pass, much as the others have. The fire is lit before dawn. The well welcomes its first visitors while the stars still linger overhead. The baker's ovens glow warmly against the darkness, and the church bell continues its patient work of marking the passing hours. Life settles into its familiar rhythm once again. The traveller remains at the inn for several days before quietly continuing his journey north. He leaves behind little more than a few horseshoe prints in the snow, and a handful of stories exchanged beside the evening fire. Soon enough, another traveller arrives, then another. Some bring cheerful news of healthy livestock. Others speak of difficult roads, flooded crossings, or harsh weather farther south. The stories are never exactly alike. Like snowflakes drifting through the winter air, each follows its own path. You gradually learn that certainty is a rare companion for anyone living in the 14th century. News travels only as quickly as a horse can walk. Letters are uncommon. Most people cannot read them, even if they arrive. Instead, the world is stitched together by conversation, by memory, by trust. A merchant remembers what a monk told him. The monk repeats what a pilgrim once described. The pilgrim recalls only part of what another traveler claimed to have witnessed. By the time a story reaches your village, it has crossed rivers, forests, mountain passes, and countless evenings spent beside unfamiliar fires. No wonder the truth often arrives wearing many different faces. One morning, as you step outside with a basket of kindling beneath your arm, something catches your attention. At first, it seems almost too small to notice. A single drop of water falls from the edge of the roof. Then another. You stop. For several moments, nothing happens. Then, drip. Another tiny drop lands softly upon the packed snow. The icicles hanging beneath the thatched roof have begun to melt. Only slightly, only for a short while during the warmest hours of the day. Still, it is enough. You lift your eyes toward the pale winter sun. It climbs just a little higher than it did a few weeks ago. The daylight lingers a little longer each evening. The change is almost impossible to notice from one day to the next. Yet, over many days, it becomes unmistakable. Winter is slowly releasing its hold upon the land. The villagers notice these small changes immediately. No calendar is needed. Nature keeps its own careful record. The shepherd remarks that the sheep seem more restless than usual. The blacksmith works with the forge door standing open for the first time in many weeks. Children discover patches of earth beneath the snow and immediately begin poking them with sticks, delighted by every glimpse of brown soil. Hope often begins in very ordinary ways. A longer afternoon, a bird returning to an old nest, the sound of running water beneath melting ice. These are quiet announcements. Nature never hurries. You walk toward the stream beside the mill. Its steady current now carries small fragments of broken ice downstream. The great wooden wheel turns a little more easily than before, no longer fighting against the thick frozen edges that had slowed it during the coldest weeks. The miller notices your smile. It won't be long now. You think spring is close? He nods confidently. The stream always knows before we do. He gestures toward the flowing water. When she begins singing again, the fields won't stay asleep much longer. You pause to listen. He is right. The stream sounds different, clearer, livelier. The days continue to lengthen. At first, the change is almost impossible to notice. The church bell still rings before dawn. The baker still lights his ovens while most of the village sleeps. The blacksmith's hammer still echoes through the crisp morning air. Children still chase one another along muddy lanes whenever the weather allows. Life continues just as it always has, and perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. History is often imagined as a series of dramatic moments. Great battles, royal proclamations, triumphant victories, terrible disasters. Yet for the overwhelming majority of people who have ever lived, history has never felt dramatic while it was happening. It has felt ordinary. It has sounded like the crackle of a fire before sunrise. It has smelled of fresh bread cooling on a wooden shelf. It has looked like smoke rising peacefully from familiar chimneys on a cold winter morning. You stand outside your cottage once more. The snow has begun to retreat from the southern slopes where the sunlight lingers longest. Small streams weave between patches of frozen ground, carrying melted snow toward the river beyond the village. The earth beneath your boots feels softer now. Not warm, not yet, but awake. Nearby, the shepherd guides his flock toward the first open grass that has appeared since autumn. The sheep hesitate for only a moment before eagerly lowering their heads. Even they seem to recognize the changing season. The old oak beside the well has not yet grown new leaves. Its branches remain bare against the pale sky, yet tiny buds have begun to appear at the ends of its limbs, so small that many people would walk past without ever noticing them. Nature rarely announces its greatest changes with great fanfare. It whispers, patiently, one careful step at a time. The village does much the same. The cooper finishes repairing the last of the winter barrels. The carpenter begins replacing weathered roof shingles damaged by months of snow and frost. Women kneel beside tiny garden plots, gently clearing away old stems left behind from the previous year. Children gather smooth stones from the fields, proudly carrying them home in little baskets much too heavy for their small arms. Everywhere you look, people are preparing for a future they cannot fully see. Perhaps that has always been one of humanity's quiet strengths: to prepare, to hope, to build tomorrow before tomorrow arrives. You pause beside the stream where the mill wheel turns steadily. The rushing water is louder now than it was only weeks ago. Ice has given way to flowing current. The sound fills the valley with quiet energy. The miller notices you standing nearby. He rests his hand upon the weathered wooden railing and smiles. She never stops. You know he speaks of the stream. Winter slows her. Summer strengthens her. The thought stays with you long after you continue your walk. Perhaps people are not so different. Generations come and go. Children grow into parents. Parents become grandparents. New cottages rise while old ones slowly disappear. But life itself continues flowing forward, steady, patient, endlessly renewing itself. Later that afternoon, you find yourself once again climbing the gentle path toward the church. The churchyard is quieter now. Snow still lingers in the deepest shadows, but much of the ground has begun to reveal the grass beneath. The priest stands outside the doorway, watching the sunlight spread across the valley. He notices your approach and smiles warmly. It seems spring has remembered us. It certainly has. For a while, neither of you speaks. Some conversations are best shared through silence. Eventually, he says quietly, "People often ask whether difficult times ever truly end." You glance toward him. And what do you tell them? He watches a flock of birds crossing the afternoon sky. I tell them that seasons always change. The world has seen many winters, and every one of them eventually gave way to spring. His words are simple,
Yet they carry the quiet confidence of someone who has watched many years pass.
As you begin walking home, the village appears almost exactly as it did on the day your story began. Smoke rises from familiar chimneys. Children laugh beside the stream. The blacksmith's forge glows warmly against the fading light. The baker carries another basket of fresh loaves toward the market. A dog races happily after a runaway chicken, while its owner laughs instead of scolding it. Ordinary moments, beautiful moments, the kind that history books rarely record. And yet, perhaps they should. Centuries from now, scholars will write about the year 1348. They will debate causes and consequences. They will study trade routes, climate, medicine, and kingdoms. They will count numbers, draw maps, write long volumes filled with careful research. All of that matters, but none of those books will ever fully capture the feeling of standing in this little village as evening settles across the rooftops. They cannot fully describe the smell of oak smoke drifting through cold air, the comfort of warming tired hands beside a familiar hearth, the quiet kindness of neighbors carrying water for one another, the sound of children's laughter echoing between timber cottages, or the peaceful certainty that tomorrow's bread must still be baked before sunrise. History remembers events, life remembers moments, and it is moments like these that fill most human lives. The sun begins its slow descent behind the western hills. Golden light washes gently across the village one final time. Windows begin glowing with the warm light of evening fires. One by one, families return home. Doors close softly. Lanterns are lit. The day's work has come to an end. You step inside your own cottage. The familiar warmth greets you once more. The fire burns steadily within the hearth. Its orange light dances across the wooden walls, exactly as it did on that first winter morning. You remove your cloak and hang it beside the door. Your boots rest near the fire to dry. Someone stirs another pot of simple stew. Someone else hums a quiet melody while mending a wool cloak. Outside, dusk settles gently across the village. The church bell rings, not loudly, not urgently, simply as it always has. Its deep voice rolls across the valley before slowly fading into the evening sky. You sit beside the fire. The flames rise and fall in their slow, timeless rhythm. Their gentle crackling fills the little room. Beyond the shutters, the first stars begin appearing once again, much as they did on the night your journey began. You think of the traveler, the healer, the baker, the miller, the blacksmith, the priest, the children who laughed in the snow, the neighbors who quietly carried water for one another. None of them believed they were extraordinary. They were simply living, one ordinary day at a time, and perhaps that is what history truly is. Not only the stories of kings and kingdoms, but the quiet lives of ordinary people. People who rose before dawn, worked with honest hands, shared what little they had, loved their families, helped their neighbors, and trusted that tomorrow, whatever it might bring, was worth preparing for. The fire settles into glowing embers, the cottage grows quieter. Outside, the village sleeps beneath a sky filled with countless stars. Winter is giving way to spring. The seasons continue their endless turning. Craftsmen. Some remain only long enough to water their horses before continuing onward. Others stay for several days. Only when the rider reaches the edge of the square does the innkeeper step forward. "You've come a long way," he says. The stranger nods wearily. "Farther than I expected." His voice is rough from cold air and long hours on lonely roads. The innkeeper gently takes the horse's reins. "You'll both want warmth." The traveler smiles faintly. "I believe you're right." Several villagers quietly return to their morning work. Others remain where they are, pretending not to listen while listening very carefully. Travelers are living libraries. Every journey carries news. Every road connects one village to another. Most people never travel more than a few days from the place where they were born. Instead, the world comes to them. The stranger accepts a wooden cup of warm ale outside the inn before removing his heavy gloves. His fingers are red from the cold. He warms them slowly around the cup. No one immediately asks questions. That would be considered impolite. First comes warmth, then food. Only afterward does conversation naturally begin. The blacksmith arrives carrying a bundle of horseshoes awaiting repair. Bad roads? The traveler lets out a tired breath. Worse than usual. The river crossing south of Ashford froze. We lost nearly half a day. The blacksmith nods knowingly. It happens every winter. It does. For a few moments the conversation remains comfortably ordinary. Snow, roads, broken wagon wheels, hungry horses, the everyday difficulties shared by anyone who travels during winter. Then, almost absent-mindedly, the innkeeper asks, "And how are things farther south?" The traveler looks into the steaming cup held between his hands, long enough that several villagers notice. They're quieter. Only that. Quieter. What do you mean? He searches for the right words. Some villages feel different. The markets aren't as busy. More houses have their shutters closed. The churches are fuller than they were last autumn. His voice remains calm, matter of fact. He is describing what he has seen, not attempting to frighten anyone. Do they know why? The traveler slowly shakes his head. Everyone has an explanation. No two explanations are the same. A few villagers exchange thoughtful glances. The healer's words return to your mind. People become frightened whenever they cannot explain something. The traveler continues. One priest blamed the cold. A merchant blamed spoiled grain. A physician spoke of unhealthy air. He gives a small shrug. I simply know what I saw. The village grows quiet. Not silent. Children still laugh somewhere beyond the cottages. The mill wheel still turns beside the stream. The blacksmith's hammer rings across the square. Life continues. Yet the conversation settles gently over everyone present. Not like a storm. More like fresh snow. Soft. Quiet. Impossible to ignore. The innkeeper finally smiles. Well, you've reached a peaceful village. We'll see that you have a hot meal. The traveler's tired face softens. I've been looking forward to that since sunrise. A ripple of gentle laughter moves through the group. The the tension eases. Someone leads the horse toward the stable. Another villager offers to brush the snow from its saddle. Acts of kindness come naturally here, especially during winter, especially towards strangers who have spent long days on dangerous roads. As the traveler disappears inside the inn, the square slowly returns to its familiar rhythm. Buckets continue rising from the well. Fresh bread emerges from the bakery. Smoke climbs lazily from every chimney. The church bell rings across the village. Another ordinary morning, and yet for the first time, the stories no longer belong only to distant travelers passing from village to village. Now they have a face, a tired man, a weary horse, mud frozen upon worn leather boots. Simple details. The years pass. The centuries follow. Yet somewhere within the pages of history, this little village remains, waiting patiently for someone to remember that behind every great event, there were ordinary people simply living their lives. And now, as the fire burns low and the night grows wonderfully still, you let your eyes grow heavy. Your breathing slows. The world beyond the cottage quietly fades away. Only the soft crackle of the hearth remains. And beneath the peaceful sky of medieval Europe, there comes a moment each year when winter quietly begins to let go. No trumpet announces it. No messenger arrives to declare that the cold has ended. Instead, the change reveals itself through countless small details that might easily pass unnoticed by hurried eyes. A patch of earth appears where yesterday there was only snow. The afternoon sun lingers just a little longer above the western hills. The wind loses some of its sharpness. Water begins to move where ice had rested for many silent weeks. Standing outside your cottage in the early morning light, you notice these changes one by one. The roof no longer wears its heavy blanket of snow. Only a few white patches remain beneath the shaded side of the thatch, where the sunlight reaches last. Tiny drops of water fall steadily from the eaves. Each one lands upon the ground with a soft tap before disappearing into the darkening soil below. The village feels different, not transformed, simply awakening. Smoke still rises from every chimney. A baker still begins work before dawn. The blacksmith's hammer still echoes across the square. Yet there is a quiet energy beneath these familiar sounds, as though the entire village has drawn a long breath after enduring another difficult winter. The lane outside has become softer beneath your boots. Where frozen earth once rang like stone, it now yields ever so slightly beneath each careful step. Along the edges of the path, narrow ribbons of green begin pushing through the damp soil. Small shoots, delicate, determined, no taller than your thumb. Yet somehow they seem stronger than the snow that covered them only days before. You kneel for a closer look. They ask for nothing, they simply grow. Nature has little interest in the worries carried by mankind. The seasons continue their patient journey, whether kingdoms rise or fall, whether roads remain busy or empty, whether people celebrate or mourn. Spring comes all the same. As you continue toward the village green, familiar sounds greet you from every direction. A rooster calls proudly from a nearby yard. The steady clatter of wooden wheels announces a farmer returning from the fields. Somewhere, a cow lows gently, eager to leave the warmth of the winter barn. High above, birds circle beneath a sky that has become noticeably brighter than it was only weeks ago. The first swallows have returned. They dart effortlessly through the cool morning air, twisting and turning with astonishing grace before disappearing beneath the eaves of the church roof. Several children stop whatever they are doing simply to watch them. There they are. One points excitedly toward the sky. They're back. The oldest woman standing beside the well smiles without looking up from her bucket. They always come back. There is quiet comfort in those simple words. They always come back. The daylight, hope itself. At the edge of the village, farmers have begun walking their fields once again. Not yet to sow every crop. The earth is still too cool for that. Instead, they inspect the soil carefully, turning it gently with wooden tools, feeling its moisture between weathered fingers. Generations have learned to read the land long before written calendars became common. The earth itself tells them when it is ready. A few lambs stumble awkwardly across a nearby pasture. Their legs seem almost too long for their tiny bodies. They leap clumsily after one another, discovering the world with endless curiosity. Watching them, it is difficult not to smile. Only weeks ago, this same field lay silent beneath snowdrifts. Now it carries new life. The shepherd leans comfortably against his crook, observing them with quiet satisfaction. They never learn to walk before they try to run. He chuckles softly. They remind me of children. You laugh together. The sound drifts peacefully across the meadow before being carried away by the breeze. Back within the village, the cooper has rolled several newly finished barrels into the sunlight. The fresh oak staves glow warmly where they catch the afternoon light. Nearby, the carpenter replaces a weathered gatepost that finally surrendered after one storm too many. The blacksmith works with the wide doors of his forge thrown open, allowing cool spring air to mingle with the warmth of glowing iron. The rhythm of his hammer seems almost cheerful today. Clang, clang, clang. Each strike echoes confidently through the village. Work continues. It always does. Yet now the work feels different. Less about enduring winter, more about preparing for the months ahead. Gardens will soon be planted, roofs repaired, fields sown, animals moved into fresh pasture. Every task looks toward tomorrow. As the afternoon grows warmer, more villagers gather outside their homes. Some sit upon simple wooden benches, carved by fathers and grandfathers long ago. Others weave baskets beneath the shade of budding trees. Children invent games with smooth stones gathered from the stream. A young mother rocks her sleeping child, while sunlight filters gently through the branches overhead. There is laughter, conversation, the easy rhythm of neighbors who have known one another for many years. You realize that very little of this will ever appear in the great chronicles of history. No monk will carefully copy today's conversations into an illuminated manuscript. No royal messenger will carry news of the shepherd's first lambs. No scholar centuries from now will write about the smell of fresh bread drifting across this little square. Yet these moments matter. Perhaps they matter more than anyone living here could possibly imagine. History often remembers wars, kings, battles, great disasters, but the world itself has always been held together by quieter things. By families sharing supper after long days, by neighbors repairing fences together, by children laughing without any thought for tomorrow, by hands planting seeds in the hope that someone will one day harvest them. These are the moments that fill most human lives. They are easy to overlook, yet without them, history would have no foundation at all. As evening approaches, golden light spills gently across the village. The last patches of snow shimmer briefly before disappearing into the warming earth. The church bell rings across the valley. Its familiar voice sounds no different from any other evening. Steady, patient, unhurried. You pause for one final look across the rooftops. Smoke curls lazily into the calm spring sky. The stream glitters beyond the mill. Swallows wheel gracefully overhead before settling beneath the eaves for the night. The village breathes quietly around you. Life has not become perfect. Questions still remain. The roads beyond the hills still carry uncertain news. No one here can see the full shape of the months that lie ahead. Yet despite every uncertainty, the seasons continue to turn, the earth continues to awaken, and ordinary people continue doing what they have always done. They rise with the dawn, care for one another, work with honest hands, and greet each new morning with quiet hope. The day has drawn quietly to its close. The warmth of the afternoon has faded, and the cool air of evening settles gently across the valley once more. A soft breeze moves through the budding branches of the old oak beside the well, carrying with it the fresh scent of damp earth and distant fields. You stand for a moment outside your cottage, taking in the peaceful scene before you. The village is changing from the busy rhythm of daylight to the calm stillness of night. Farmers return from their fields with tired but satisfied steps. A shepherd guides the last of his flock through the wooden gate, pausing to count each familiar face before fastening the latch. The cooper rolls his final barrel beneath shelter. The carpenter carefully gathers his tools, brushing away the day's sawdust before placing each one back into its worn leather satchel. Across the square, the blacksmith opens the doors of his forge one last time. The brilliant glow of the fire fades as he spreads the coals with a long iron poker. The day's final sparks rise slowly into the evening sky before disappearing into the growing darkness. He smiles quietly to himself. There will always be another day's work. Tomorrow, another horseshoe may need shaping, another hinge may need repairing, another plowshare may require his careful hands. But not tonight. Tonight, the forge may finally rest. You continue walking through the narrow village lane. The muddy footprints left by the day's travelers have already begun to dry beneath the cool evening air. A few chickens scratch lazily near the edge of the road before settling upon their perches. A sleepy dog stretches comfortably outside the baker's door, lifting his head only long enough to watch you pass before curling back into a warm ball. The familiar scent of fresh bread still lingers in the air. Inside the bakery, the final loaves have already been stacked neatly upon wooden shelves, ready to greet tomorrow's customers before sunrise. The baker carefully sweeps flour from the stone floor, while his children laugh quietly as they help tidy the room. Their laughter is softer now than it was earlier in the day. Even children seem to understand when evening has arrived. As you leave the village square, your footsteps carry you toward the small stream beyond the mill. The water moves gently over smooth stones, its quiet song filling the cool air with peaceful rhythm. Only weeks ago, this stream struggled beneath thick sheets of ice. Now it flows freely beneath the fading light, reflecting the colors of the evening sky like polished glass. You pause upon the little wooden bridge. The mill wheel turns slowly beside you. Its steady creaking has become one of the village's oldest voices. Many generations have heard that same sound. Children who once played beside these waters grew into parents. Parents became grandparents. Years slipped quietly into decades. Decades became centuries. Yet still the stream continued its patient journey toward the river beyond the hills. Watching the flowing water, it becomes difficult to tell where one season truly ends and another begins. Life moves much the same way, one day gently becoming the next, one generation quietly giving way to another. The sky above has begun its own gentle transformation. The brilliant blue of afternoon slowly softens into shades of gold, then amber, then rose. Clouds drift lazily overhead, their edges glowing warmly in the last light of the setting sun. For a few precious moments, the entire valley seems wrapped in quiet gold. The rooftops shine. The church tower glows. Even the worn stones of the village path seem somehow beautiful beneath the evening light. No one rushes. There is nowhere important to be. Even the birds seem content, simply to glide upon the cooling breeze before disappearing into their nests for the night. Eventually, the church bell rings. Its familiar voice rolls slowly across the valley, one gentle note, then another. Each sound lingers for a moment before fading into the peaceful evening. The villagers hear it from wherever they are. Some pause in conversation, others quietly bow their heads. Many simply smile, grateful for another ordinary day safely brought to its close. You begin walking home. Small windows glow warmly throughout the village as families gather around their evening fires. Through one doorway, you hear someone telling a familiar story to wide-eyed children. Through another comes the gentle melody of an old lullaby, softly sung while a mother rocks her baby to sleep. From somewhere farther down the lane comes quiet laughter shared between old friends. It is a simple village. Nothing here would seem remarkable to a king. No towering castles, no magnificent cathedrals, no grand feasts or glittering courts. And yet, it is filled with riches of another kind. The comfort of familiar faces, the warmth of shared bread, the strength of neighbors helping one another through long winters. The quiet certainty that tomorrow, just as today, someone will rise before dawn to light the first fire. Someone will knead fresh bread. Someone will ring the church bell. Someone will carry water from the well. Someone will greet a friend with a smile. These simple acts are rarely remembered by history, yet they are the very threads from which history is woven. You reach your cottage. The wooden door opens with its familiar creak. Warmth welcomes you immediately. The fire burns low, but steadily within the hearth. Its gentle orange light dances across the timber walls, casting soft shadows that seem almost alive. You remove your cloak and place it carefully upon its wooden peg. Your boots rest beside the hearth, where they will dry before morning. A simple meal waits upon the table. Nothing extravagant, just warm stew, coarse bread, and a little cheese. The kind of meal shared by countless families across medieval Europe. You eat slowly, without hurry. Outside, darkness settles gently across the valley. The first stars begin appearing overhead, one by one, until the heavens are filled with quiet points of light. The same stars watched by shepherds, by travelers, by monks copying manuscripts beneath candlelight, and by countless ordinary people whose names have long since been forgotten. You step outside one final time before sleep. The village has become wonderfully still. Only the faint crackle of distant hearth fires and the gentle murmur of the stream disturb the silence. You look toward the hills that surround the valley. Beyond them lies a vast world, great kingdoms, busy ports, ancient forests, long roads stretching farther than you could ever walk. Somewhere beyond those hills, history will continue unfolding in ways no one here can yet imagine. But here, in this quiet little village, life will greet tomorrow just as it greeted today, with work, with kindness, with hope. You take one last slow breath of the cool evening air, then you return inside. The fire has settled into glowing embers. Their gentle warmth fills the room with peaceful comfort. You settle onto your straw mattress, wrapping your wool blanket closely around your shoulders. The sounds of the village grow quieter still. A final bark from a distant dog. The soft hoot of an owl somewhere beyond the trees. The whisper of the evening breeze passing over the thatched roof. Your eyelids begin to feel pleasantly heavy. The worries of the day drift away like smoke rising into the night sky. Tomorrow will arrive in its own time. The baker will light his oven. The shepherd will open the pasture gate. The blacksmith will stir the forge back to life. Children will laugh in the lanes. Neighbors will greet one another beside the well. Life will continue, just as it always has. And perhaps that is the quiet truth this little village has shared with you. History is not only the story of kings, battles, and great events. It is also the story of ordinary people who lived with quiet courage, found joy in simple moments, and cared for one another through changing seasons. As the last embers glow softly beside you, and the peaceful sounds of the village fade into the night, your breathing slows, your thoughts grow lighter. The stars continue their silent watch above medieval Europe. The valley rests, the village sleeps, and now, so do you.